Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual, and actually, I think that this is going to be a bit of a long show today, but maybe not. Maybe it'll flow smoother than I think. Okay, imagine writing this headline in the Red Toronto Star: 35 cents stock price, 35 cents, like almost. I mean, valueless. Anyway, imagine writing this and publishing this about any other race. This is the headline. Mostly white COVIDiots at Trinity Bellwoods Park think the rules don't apply to them. They're right. Like, just imagine having any other race there. Why is that one okay? I just think it's funny. I mean, it's not funny. It's very, very. It's crazy, right? It's crazy, and people believe that you can't be racist towards white people because white people have privilege. Like, they've twisted the rules around so that they suit them. It's very interesting. I mean, like, post-truth world, right? Truth is what you make it. It's weird. The other day, I said that the minority that Trudeau enjoys, if the NDP don't play ball, the Bloc Québécois will play ball, and if the Bloc Québécois won't play ball, then the NDP probably will help out, right? Like, either one has enough to put them over the top. So all they have to do is give policies, some concessions to Quebec, some concessions to workers, right? To signal to the NDP they're on side, and everybody carries on in this leftist utopia, right? Here's National Post reporting. Trudeau backs paid sick leave plan to get NDP support for Liberals' parliament proposal. Remember what happened when the government came through and said $15 an hour, $14 an hour is the minimum wage now. And everybody was celebrating and saying, we should be more, it should be, let's just make it, like, if a minimum wage is a higher minimum wage is good, why not $200 an hour, right? Like, let's just pay everybody everything, right? Oh, right, because the impact was that people lost hours, right? Lost hours. Some people no longer qualified for benefits. Some people, if they were working 20 hours, were now working 15. If they were working 40 hours, they were working 35. And because of the extra pay. And was that an unintended consequence? There were people who were upset about it. And everything also, the prices of everything went up. Have you been to a grocery store lately? Have you seen rent lately? Like, yes, having a higher minimum wage looks good. But if it doesn't have any more buying power, what's the use, right? Like, if in fact you can purchase less with the same amount of money, then have you gained anything? Or, like, it just seems people aren't thinking, right? It just seems. Anyway, back to this. The NDP are supporting Trudeau to push this through. So Trudeau backs paid sick leave plan to get NDP support for Liberals' parliament proposal. Okay. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau backed a national requirement for 10 days paid sick leave Monday to get the NDP's support for the Liberal plan for Parliament this summer. And to be clear, I don't know what the unintended consequence might be, but I fear there will be unintended consequences. Like, oh, we'll do this, and then, to pay for this, we have to do this. But you guys want this, so... Right? That's what I think. Back to this. Quote, we need a commitment that the government is willing to provide paid sick leave to all Canadians, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh said at a Monday morning press conference. Singh said no one should have to choose between going to work and not being able to pay the bills, especially during a pandemic, and he wanted a clear commitment from the government. Trudeau gave that commitment during his daily press conference in front of Rideau College. Quote, nobody should have to choose between taking a day off work due to illness or being able to pay their bills, he said. The government will continue discussions with the provinces without delay on ensuring that as we enter the recovery phase of the pandemic, every worker in Canada who needs it has access to 10 days of paid sick leave a year. The government will have to get provinces and potentially employers on board to make sick leave a reality, but Trudeau said they were committed to doing that work. The Liberal proposal for the House of Commons is not the full return to Parliament Conservatives were looking for. It would add an additional day to the COVID-19 committee that has been running for weeks. It would also adapt that committee to a hybrid format with some MPs in the chamber and others participating through video conference with large screens in the House of Commons. It seems more and more like Idiocracy. Like, can you imagine Trudeau on a big screen in the House of Commons? Or V for Vendetta, right? Like, both are post-apocalyptic movies. One is funnier than the other, right? V for Vendetta is hilarious. Okay, but I mean, big Justin Trudeau in the House of Commons, everybody lined up and pledging fealty to great leader who's on his screen, who shows up 4 days of summer. Because, he's surfing. I wonder how many days he's going to go surfing this summer. It's interesting. Back to this. The COVID-19 committee would now meet 4 days a week, up from the 3 it had been. The other House of Commons committees that have been running would continue to run and meet virtually. The vote on the government's proposal will likely happen Tuesday, but Liberals speaking on background said they believed it would pass through the House of Commons. The Commons Procedure Committee would also be tasked with changing more of Parliament's rules to allow for things like remote voting. I think there's security concerns on that, and why would you graft the old system onto the internet? Why not create... Anyway, blah. Back to this. I understand why not create a whole new system. I mean, like, that's a lot harder than just grafting it onto the on top. But the system is built because we can't do direct democracy. The internet allows direct democracy, or a version of it that would be much more manageable than you could manage with paper and ballots back in 100 years ago when our system was developed, right? And now we're developing this weird hybrid system that makes very little sense, but people aren't working as much. But they say at the end of the article that it results in more time and more questions and more accountability. If you've watched Mr. Morneau answer questions, you know that's not true, okay? Just because he's not answering questions, like, the accountability is not there, because if you say, what, yes or no, are you standing up right now? He says, oh, standing is a bit of a philosophical conundrum, but us Liberals are working hard to achieve relative normalcy towards it. I mean, like, it just doesn't make any sense, the garbage that comes out of his mouth. It's annoying because he's the finance minister, and you would expect that he should be able to answer simple questions on the finances of the country. Anyway, it's frustrating when they say the accountability is there, but it's not. Anyway, I'll get to that part in the article. I'm diatribing too much. The Commons Procedure Committee would also be tasked with changing more to remote voting. Not a good idea. One of the many complaints about the existing format is that the COVID-19 committees limits the opposition to questions on the issue. The House would also sit on 4 days spread out over July and August, and on those days, all topics could be discussed. 4 days? The House of Commons has effectively been prorogued, except for this committee, since March. And we get 4 days where we can bring up other issues? 4 days in the summer? Governance? More governance. This is perfect. It's a hybrid system. It's great. It's not. It's not. Before COVID-19, 4 days over July and August. On those days, all topics could be discussed. Before COVID-19, the House was scheduled to sit through to the end of June and then recess until September. Speaking in the House of Commons, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer made the case for a full return to Parliament. He said Canada's Parliament could trace its lineage to the first shoots of democracy in Britain. He noted Canada and Britain's Parliament had both sat through world wars, previous pandemics, and other crises, and shouldn't have to stop now. Quote, democracy has unquestionably evolved in the intervening centuries. Has democracy evolved? I think the core of democracy is the same. Aren't people free to make their own choice? How has democracy evolved, Andrew Scheer? In the intervening centuries, one of the few constraints amidst this change is that the House of Commons always meets in person. He said, we believe members of Parliament should return to work in this House in a full parliamentary function. Returning to a full parliament would mean a return of opposition days and a resumption of private members' bills moving through the House of Commons. Scheer said as long as MPs come to the House in limited numbers, there's no reason that Parliament shouldn't return. Government scrutiny has largely been left to press conferences that the Prime Minister controls. The Prime Minister hosts a morning show at his doorstep, followed by a late show often hosted by the Deputy Prime Minister, he said. Government House Leader Pablo Rodriguez rejected Scheer's suggestions that accountability was lacking, pointing out hundreds of questions had been asked in the COVID-19 committee. He also said there were more than 74 committee meetings, hearing from 580 witnesses, including 23 ministerial appearances. Our committees are working, said Rodriguez. Rodriguez also pointed out that MPs would have to have more hours to question the government under this proposal than they do during a regular sitting week. Mr. Scheer said he was disappointed in the Liberals and the NDP for not supporting a return to Parliament. I've never seen so many members of Parliament work so hard during an election campaign to get elected and then work hard to not have to work hard. That's the same kind of Scheer type rhetoric I would expect. It doesn't land very well. It's hard to understand. I don't know. Frustrating. I mean, like, it's hard when the government that is, or the mechanisms that are supposed to be holding the government to account aren't articulate enough to land a hard punch, right? Like, even I don't trust the Conservatives, et cetera. I'm not a Conservative member. I'm not a Liberal member. It's either. But having a strong opposition is is important in a democracy. If you don't have a strong opposition, then, well, the leadership can do whatever they want. And I mean, this leadership has figured out how to do whatever it wants, right? Like that's very clear. That's happening. We're seeing that in real time. They align with who they need. They make the promises that they need. How's that 25% reduction in your phone bill, by the way? Did that campaign promise materialize? Yeah, I'm sure. And so same thing with Trudeau's promise to Mr. Singh, right? But anyway, regardless, here's no need to show proof of work permit to get the CERB or CERB. What's it called? I think it's the CERB, but if I've got that wrong, apologize. CERB, whatever. Ottawa tells temporary foreign residents. The federal government. This just floored me. This was published yesterday, May 25th. Today's May 26th. The federal government has taken new steps to make it easier for international students and other temporary foreign residents to receive emergency benefits. Another sign of Ottawa's determination to distribute the payments quickly and widely. Such short-term immigrants need only give their word they have a valid work permit or have applied for renewed one to obtain a Canadian emergency response benefit, says a memo sent this week to staff vetting the claims. Until last Thursday, they had to email Employment and Social Development Canada an image of their valid work or work study permit or confirmation they had applied to renew an expired one. But a memo sent to Employment and Social Development Canada officials handling CERB applications said the condition was waived effective immediately, and agents are only required to verbally obtain work permit details. I think that there was questions, this is just me quickly, I think there were questions last week about who saw this, and I don't think anybody ever answered. Like, did you sign off on this memo, Minister? Did you approve this memo? So last Thursday that was hot, and then this, now this is actually in place, right? So, and this is what this means. The directive applies to everyone who claims to meet the program's other requirements and has a 900 series social insurance number. People ranging from students to refugee claimants to temporary foreign workers and executives transferred from other countries. None are Canadian citizens or permanent residents. One source familiar with the system said people with valid permits would typically email proof within a few minutes, barely slowing the process. But now there's no way for staff to verify whether someone is in the country legally, the person said. Interesting, right? Just get the money out. We'll deal with it later. Get the money out. And here's the reason why I say this is concerning. This was published on April 24th. And I mean, like, not enough interest, not enough retweets, not enough likes. I'm sure. Oh, I retweeted this on my personal account, but I haven't tweeted it here. But one of 11, Tom Quiggin says, retweet and share, contains documentary proof of fraud by CRA and fake social insurance number scam. CRA is putting pensions and benefits of Canadians at risk. 2 of 11, here are 5 different social insurance numbers used by one person. 1 is legit, 4 are not. Note attached documents T4 and T4A, union cards to follow as well with different numbers. And here's the numbers. And 3 of 11, individuals with multiple social insurance numbers, and the list numbers. 4, CRA's role in continuing the tens of thousands of fake SIN numbers makes them complicit. They have been informed in writing multiple occasions, yet they do bureaucratic shuffle, point fingers and do nothing. The fake SIN numbers scan means tens of thousands of Canadians never get a chance at a job, which goes to an illegal migrant with a fake SIN generated by a union. CRA never questions the situation and goes along with the fraud. Here are the CRA officials who are informed in writing about mass fake SIN numbers in Hamilton. Okay, and he lists names. More people, more names. CRA has also converted individual tax numbers intended for non-residents and used it as a SIN number. Completely illegal action. Illegals with fake SIN numbers now collecting COVID benefit money as CRA will process. The compromise of SIN number program by CRA threatens the future stability of the program. Canadians who depend on government benefits or CPP or old age pensions are at risk due to financial mismanagement. For more on fake SIN numbers, please see this. There's a Quiggin Report episode with a link. And for more information in immigration debate and globalism, more about that. Interesting stuff. I don't know if these two things are connected, but I think that they're interesting to note individually and to consider together, because I mean, if the scam is happening, who's to say there aren't people either unintentionally taking advantage now that they don't have to verify anything, right, or just taking advantage intentionally, right, because people are like that. They just are. Moving on to Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia shooting, RCMP and courts still keeping some details hidden from the public. This is published yesterday as well, May 25th. Police documents related to search warrants in the Nova Scotia mass shooting investigation are being released with heavy redactions from Crown prosecutors working alongside the RCMP. These two paragraphs explain what an ITO is, and basically it's information to obtain. It's the documents they're looking for. Okay, back to this. There are at least 20 documents from the police investigation that several media organizations, including Global News, are fighting to have unsealed to ensure transparency amid growing calls for public inquiry into the mass killings. While some of the redactions are important to protect the identities of witnesses, there are nearly whole pages that are blacked out. Here's a look at some of the key sections that investigators are refusing to make public. How were the weapons obtained? One of the most heavily redacted sections of the ITOs describes the weapons found in the vehicle Gabrielle Wortman was operating just prior to being shot and killed by police at the Irving Big Stop gas station in Enfield, Nova Scotia. According to the documents, 5 weapons were retrieved from the vehicle. This includes a semi-automatic rifle with a selector switch set to fire, another semi-automatic rifle, a handgun with spent shell casings, a second handgun with an empty magazine, and a Smith & Wesson handgun that belonged to RCMP Constable Heidi Stevenson, who Wortman killed roughly an hour before being shot by police. The ITOs contain information relating to the source of these firearms, but all of the details have been redacted. And I scroll down a little bit. The possible source of the other weapons, excluding Stevenson's handgun, were also redacted, along with the caliber, make, and model of each firearm. The ITO also said that Larry Payton, an RCMP officer who conducted an examination of the weapons found in the last vehicle driven by Wortman, discovered a business card while conducting a search warrant at the gunman's Halifax residence and the denturist clinic a day after the shooting. The details of who the business card belonged to and what the line of work the person is involved in is redacted entirely. The RCMP has previously said one of the firearms Wortman used in the attacks was obtained in Canada, while the other weapons appear to have been obtained in the United States. Police have provided no additional details on the make and model of the weapons used. In terms of the origin of the weapons, who may have provided those weapons and how we obtained them, that's all subject to ongoing investigation, RCMP Superintendent Darren Campbell said during an April press conference. So the last time they talked about it was, it's just ongoing. So, I mean, all of that severely, heavily redacted, right? I scroll down. The woman also said the gunman owned several military-style guns and told police she saw him pour gasoline through the cottage. This is an eyewitness account that had been partially not redacted. Pour gasoline throughout the cottage. Oh, this is from... I'll carry on anyway. This is the account of his common-law wife, who he tied up and who she saw that he poured gasoline throughout the cottage and adjacent warehouse, as well as on his Ford 150 truck, Black Jeep, and Taurus. However, at least 8 paragraphs are completely or mostly redacted in the document and omit important details about the moment leading up to the massacre. So the thing that struck me was that the person that he tied up and held hostage described his weapons as military-style guns. It's too convenient, right? Like, really? You're using the same terminology as the news just started using? It just seems, right? Stinks. It stinks. This is just a quick headline one. Saskatchewan considers taking federal government to court over firearms ban. Basically, that's what the first 4 paragraphs say, and then they talk about the impact on the businesses. In Saskatchewan, there's a big sports shooting and just shooting culture and business out there. So they're saying, like, if there's a pathway to doing this, to take the federal government to court about it, they will. But it says in the article as well that they want to work with federal legislators. They don't want to take them to court if they can avoid it. City explores circles painted on grass to ease physical distancing. Right. I think this is just not going to work. I don't think people are going to do it. I don't think they will. I think it's just going to be another way for people to say, oh, you're not doing it right, blah, blah, blah. It's just so frustrating. Money laundering in Vancouver appears to be cottage industry inquiry hears. The public inquiry into money laundering in BC enters its second phase on Monday, with experts providing an overview of the crime and how it's regulated. The first presenter, criminologist Stephen Schneider, told Commissioner Austin Cullen that he had to rely partially on reports from Vancouver news outlets because of the lack of proper peer-reviewed studies on the topic. In Vancouver, Schneider said there seems to be businesses whose sole purpose is to launder money, and that has become a cottage industry in which people become specialists or consultants to help organized crime groups transport and launder dirty cash. I'm here. Do you want me to put some money in a bank account and then you'll withdraw it later from me for a small fee, right? I mean, sometimes that's all it takes, right? So Back to this. The inquiry was called last May by Premier John Horgan after intense pressure to hold authorities and criminal accountability accountable for the level of crime happening in the province's casino, housing market, and luxury car industry. The current round of hearings will run from May 25th to June 26th. More to come. More to come. I thought there was going to be more meat to this story, but I think that it's just interesting that this is carrying on. But yeah, like there were multi-billion, like $5.6 billion in criminal activity through the casinos and real estate market. And it bled into those markets because the other markets, the casinos got too hot, right? And I did reporting on it in early 2018 and 2019 too. Just wild, right? And now they're trying to crack down on it. Like, it's difficult to do that when they're constantly trying to focus on the mid-level people, the real estate agents, that level, the lawyers, and they're talking about this for the real estate stuff. Don't take bags full of cash for mansions, right? And it's like, well, if people are paying by cash, how do you want the suitcases are better? Like if they're in a nice suit, okay. Back to this. The last story for this morning. Northern BC has highest rate of overdose deaths, but drug users struggle to access a safe supply. A safe supply? I just don't understand how people can think that if too much of something kills you, where's the safe supply, right? And why is the government funding drug programs that aren't hinging upon people stopping the use of the drug they want to stop, right? Okay, if you want to go out and get drugs, then have fun with that. But if you want support in stopping the drugs, here's all the programs that we've got. It shouldn't be finding them a safe supply first. Like the safe supply shouldn't be the priority, right? And I'll tell you, like back in March, right? Here's the March 27th article. BC opens new pathway to safe supply for drug users amid coronavirus pandemic. They're using the pandemic as an excuse. They were rolling this out anyway. But here it goes. BC has introduced a new clinical guidance that could make it easier for people struggling with addictions to get access to safe drugs. Safe drugs? Drugs that, just get you really high but don't kill you? Like super, super high. Why would they go back to their other drug dealer? Government? The measure announced Thursday is intended as an emergency stopgap amid two public health emergencies in the province, the opioid overdose and the COVID-19 pandemic. Earlier this week, advocates for drug users have advocates. You know what I don't see? Advocates for seniors. Anyway, warned the pandemic had cut those advocates for drug users warned that the pandemic had cut the supply of illegal drugs, making them both harder to find and more expensive. Listen, this illegal thing that a lot of my people that I represent, the drug users, are doing, has become really expensive. So could you guys help us out? We don't know how to make the drugs. We just buy the drugs. So, we watched Oz and we tried to make it with our sock in our bathtub. It didn't work. So could you please make us some safe drugs? Because apparently we can only get it from China, shipped over on regular shipping. And we don't make our drugs here in Canada. Earlier this week, so the advocates. More expensive. That raised concern both of a spike in overdoses and in possible COVID-19 transmission as drug users hit the streets to try and find a hit. Like, the justification here is just hilarious. I think it's so funny. Like, it's funny. It's funny. There's no other way to describe it. It's funny. Quote, we're dealing with one public health emergency on top of another, and the challenges are unlike anything we've ever seen, said Judy Darcy, Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. Okay, but the one health crisis hasn't filled up our hospitals, so maybe the other one could be, like, prioritized, and maybe instead of giving them drugs, you could maybe give them programs that help them stop the destructive behavior rather than enabling the destructive behavior. If it's destroying people's lives, like it's destroying this guy's life, right? At one point, Jules Badeau said her boyfriend was going through $4,000 worth of cocaine in a week. He would express a desire to get sober and then in the middle of the night ask for a ride to a nearby ATM to pay his drug dealer, Buddha said in an interview. When BC rolled out its new guidelines to provide a safe supply of prescription drugs, Buddha thought it would provide a measure of relief and help wean her boyfriend off a potential toxic drug supply. But that hasn't happened, and Buddha believes medical professionals are not closely following the safe supply guidelines. It's been a struggle, she said in an interview from Prince George. I got the feeling that everyone thought I was drug seeking on behalf of my boyfriend instead of helping him get off a really dangerous cocaine habit. I'm not blaming her. I'm blaming the province and the programs. I think the programs are poorly thought out, and if you want people to get off drugs or prescription drugs, or if $4,000 a week in cocaine is not something you can afford, then you should probably not do that, because that doesn't last very long. You can't do that week after week if you can't afford it without resorting to bad means, lying to people, taking their money, stealing from people, etc. Right? So that seems to be a bad choice. If the cocaine costs $25 a week, then and you want to do it like that, go nuts, man. If that's your thing, right? But if it's negatively impacting your life and you want to change, giving people drugs is a bad idea unless you're going to subsidize it down to the point of his $4,000 a week cocaine habit costs nothing. And then is that okay? Right? Is that what we want to be doing with our tax dollars, subsidizing that, or creating the drugs for them, or supplying them with drugs? Apparently it's not working very well for this Prince George person, whom I'm not trying to blame. It's been a struggle, blah, blah, blah. I get the feeling everyone thinking I'm drug seeking. Okay, British Columbia is the first province in the country to roll out safe supply guidelines over concerns street drugs would become more toxic during the pandemic and more users would do drugs alone. Advocates and drug policy researchers have praised the guidance as a good first step in tackling BC's overdose crisis. What's step 2? Provide the drugs for the people. Question mark, question mark, question mark. Profit? Like, back to this. Quote, when they have access to more predictable supply of opiates or stimulants or I had the way to say that. Blah. As the guidelines outline, folks are able to reduce or eliminate illegal activities, says Cheyenne Johnson, the co-interim executive director of the BC Centre on Substance Abuse. Okay, so if we make the behaviors they're exhibiting legal instead of illegal, that cuts down on illegal behavior. If we just give them the drugs and say, don't worry about it, here's your safe injection site with your safe injection drugs, and don't worry about that $4,000 a week habit if you just come here every time you shoot up or you take your cocaine or whatever. And you're definitely not going to do it outside of the drugs that we're giving you, right? In our safe injection site, you're definitely not going to go back to the evil, bad drug dealer who's charging you all that money. That's never going to happen, right? Well, evidently, they're wrong, right? So it just seems crazy to double down on programs that don't solve the problem but cost a lot of money. I think that was a long time to get to that, because that's the core of it, really. Why spend money when it doesn't work? It's like, oh no, we've got a flat tire. Let's spend a whole bunch of money on another flat tire. Okay, I mean, it's not going to solve the problem, but sure, if you want to. I guess it doesn't make sense. The whole world just doesn't make sense. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com, check out CanadaReport.co, and check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I'll be recording another episode today, hopefully as soon as I hear from Greg. Fingers crossed. And have a wonderful, wonderful